Today we'll be learning about the different parts of the machine. So let's start off with the presser foot lifter. So if you look to the back of your machine, you have this lever here that moves up and down. So you'll see this portion of the machine move up and down with it. We always want to pull and lower. We don't want to push it and drop it and have it make that loud noise because the machine will break. Next is our stitch length control. So this part right here, this determines how long each of your stitches will be. So the higher the number, the longer each of your stitches. This part up here is our stitch width control. As you see, when the numbers get larger, the stitch width also gets larger. So when we're sewing something like a zigzag stitch, we want our stitch width to be quite high at a 5 and our stitch length to be at a 3. Next up is our presser foot. So the part that lowers and lifts with the presser foot lifter is your presser foot. So you always want the presser foot to be down when you're sewing anything to keep the fabric from moving and becoming really wobbly. Next is your free arm. So this portion is the free arm right here. If we're sewing anything like sleeves or the hems of shorts or pants, what we do is we open this box right here. This is our accessory box. You can put things in here to store, but we won't do that in our class because we do share classrooms. Lift this part up. And this portion right here is your free arm. So this just makes it easier for you to sew certain parts of a garment. Now we'll go back up to the top of the machine to this part right here. This is called your thread guide. As you see, the thread is being guided down this part of the sewing machine. Next we have our needle clamp. So that is this portion right here. So if we turn the needle clamp, the needle will loosen. So if we have any broken needles, all we have to do is turn the needle clamp to release the needle and then tighten it back up again. Now we have our bobbin winder thread guide. It's this thing right here that looks kind of like a screw. So whenever you need to wind a bobbin, which is one of these things, you will place the thread around the bobbin winder thread guide. And then we have our accessory box, which is what I pulled off earlier. This piece right here is called our spool holder because it holds our spool of thread, which is this thing. Whoops. And this piece that the spool of thread goes on is your spool pin. Next, we have our needle. So if you see, this is what goes in and out of your fabric and pierces your fabric and brings the thread through it. The eye of the needle is right here, as you can see. The right side of your sewing machine, you have the power and light switch. If you turn it on, the light for the sewing machine will go on so you can see more clearly. And if you just turn it off after you're done sewing. This part up here is called our top cover. So it just covers the top of the machine. Some machines won't have this top cover and the spool of thread will just be open on top. Here to the right we have a dial. It's called the pattern selector dial. So what this does, you see as I'm turning it, the numbers will change and it'll go to different types of patterns. So in this class primarily we will be using number 3, which is a zigzag stitch, and number 1, which is a straight stitch. Now if we flip the top cover up again, there's a dial right here. This is called the tension dial. If we turn it to 0, the stitches will be very loose, and the higher the number, the tighter the stitches will be. So depending on your fabric, The fabric we'll be using in class is mostly going to be at a tension level of 4. This part right here is our foot pedal. Like the foot pedal of a car, the harder you press it, the faster the machine will go. But we never want to put our full force onto it because the machine will go way too fast and you'll lose control of your stitches. This part right here is our hand wheel. So as I turn the hand wheel, you see the needle is lifting up and down. So a lot of this times we will use this hand wheel to move our needle. If we look to the bottom of our sewing machine, lift up our presser foot lifter. This portion right here with these little teeth almost is called the feed dogs. So the feed dogs is what actually moves your fabric through the sewing machine without you having to force it to move. Now up here is our bobbin winder spindle. You put an empty bobbin on here to wind it up with more thread. So if we want to wind our bobbin, we always make sure that we click this to the right side in order to wind and click it back to the left in order to sew. Now this portion right here is called our thread take-up lever. So if we move our hand wheel up and down, the thread take-up lever will appear and then disappear. So we always want it to be visible when we're threading our machine. Let's go to the side of the machine here. This little piece is our thread cutter. So if we have a piece of thread and we want to cut it quickly, we just put it into the thread cutter and just pull, and the thread will cut. Now this button is very, very important. We always have to press this button when we start and end our stitches in order to secure our stitches, or they just come undone. So we always press this button for the reverse stitch, also known as a back stitch. Here we have our needle plate. You see a lot of numbers on them. Most of the time we will line it up to this 5/8 line, or also known as 1.5. So this is the seam allowance, and it teaches you where to place your fabric. So this is our needle plate that has the numbers on it for our seam allowance. And lastly is our bobbin. This is our bobbin here. We put this at the bottom of our machine in order to sew because the two threads come together to make one stitch.